is Father Bill Smith, the pastor of St. Charles Borromeo Church, welcoming you to another episode of St. Charles at Home. This is our opportunity to speak together as members of the parish, the priest who gave the homily, with a parishioner about some of the concerns or interests that might have arisen from it. Today we have a parishioner, Alexander, who is far away from us in geography, but of course not in spirit. So Alexander, please first tell us how to pronounce your last name, which I'm reluctant to do,
Sure.
and then tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. The last name is pronounced Lerangis. It's Greek, so originally it was Lerangis, which they then changed after the fact. I think my great-grandfather to kind of Americanize it. But in any case, born and raised in New York, and I went to school and was in Charlotte for a while, and since then I've obviously come back up to the New York area and found myself in Brooklyn, raised Catholic, and to be honest, I did a fair amount of shopping around in the area, so I probably went to close to double-digit, different services, and I was, especially taken with what I saw here at St. Charles. And so I've been now a parishioner for about a year, and I've been, really happy since I joined. I'm involved in the Young Professionals Ministry, which I really like, and obviously we have a really vibrant community, so I'm definitely excited to also be taking part in this today.
Wonderful. Now, you said that you had a couple of questions that arose from the readings and homily of last Sunday. Would you like to express some of them?
Sure. Yeah. So there were a couple, portions of the gospel that resonated with me, and I had some questions for you, based on those.
Okay.
So the first is, obviously we're talking the Gospel of Matthew, and so in the gospel he says, and this is Jesus speaking to his apostles, "And whoever does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me." And so to me, when I first read that, I kind of interpreted it as like a call to action.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in this case, Jesus to his apostles, and then, to me in Matthew now, it's kind of a call to action for whoever the reader might be. And so in that way, I found it rather personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I read that, the different emotions that resonated were things like courage, perseverance, and strength. And I was wondering, you mentioned in your homily about when you first, became a priest, and some of the, initial trials and tribulations that you might not have foreseen. And I was wondering, either from that time or at other times in your life, when you have felt especially compelled to action, whether that be, when you first decided you wanted to become a priest or since then.
Well, I had one of the old classic vocations. I knew I wanted to be a priest since I was about 8, and then went to the high school seminary, the seminary college, and then the major seminary, with a little time off to live in North Carolina, not too far from where you were, in Winston-Salem. So in a sense, I wasn't really thinking too much about what I was actually doing. I was looking at myself, saying, okay, this is what God wants me to do. I grew up in a very traditional parish, with a very good liturgical sense. But for instance, it was customary at the time that the pastor would take a person interested in being a priest around. This pastor, when we would go anywhere, would take me to a hospital first or a nursing home. And he didn't say, well, this is what we were expected to do. I just sort of picked that up. So the pastoral work, I said, okay, fine, this is what is engendered. But then the world changed. This was the late 70s. By that point, the world had changed. We just didn't realize it. And then more and more different kinds of questions that people would ask I never quite asked about what, I was going to live with a rectory with a lot of men, which is sort of like a frat house. And that was a peculiarity, to put it mildly. So it was more and more, okay, I don't have this figured out. And so it became, for me, more in different ways at different times, saying, okay, Jesus, I signed on for this. What's next? And there were a lot of what nexts. Picking up the cross, as I mentioned in the homily, we have our view in the modern Western world is rather domesticated. The daily grind of life. That's not what it meant for those people at that time. I mean, Cicero said that referred to the cross as that which may not be mentioned, because it was such a horrible death, destroying you both physically and emotionally and socially. So part of being a Christian is to acknowledge that there are times that you carry the cross, and we have to expect that will occur daily. Jesus, we're also told that my yoke is easy and my burden light, but there's still a yoke, and there's still a burden. So that would be my sort of history of recognizing the importance of that passage.
Gotcha. And so when you think back to those early days, in what ways has your experience since then both, aligned to your expectations of what, the day-to-day of being a priest would be, and in what ways has it been different?
Well, as I have said many times, the assignment that I had first time out as a priest, I was in parish as a deacon for a year, was peculiar in that my uncle was the former pastor. The pastor at the time was a very interesting man, and I'll just leave it at that. So any kind of mentoring I was going to get would come from my uncle, who was almost 80 at the time, wonderful man, really knew how to survive the priesthood. But in terms of really knowing how to become a priest, that was the lay people in the parish. I was just astonishing that God put into my life the absolute perfect people. Mostly, when I think about it, older women who were dying. And their faith was just astonishing. And so that, I think, was the first thing. Was not only, gee, they can move me to any group of people that they want. And some of these people are going to be very interesting. But it was being moved to the depth that, I didn't have the faith that these people had. But I said, that's, I hope, my future. This is what I want from life, that I will have that kind of relationship with God. One woman, she wouldn't take her painkillers until she received. So I kept going earlier and earlier and earlier. And eventually I decided, let's just have Mass, because I knew it was coming to the end. And so her friends came. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning, might even have been earlier. And when I was turned to give her communion, she said, I can't wait to die. And I assumed that was what I would have meant, because I'm really in pain and I want to get this over with.
Right.
Then she said, so I can thank God for the wonderful life I had.
Wow.
Now, I was 27 years old. I had no idea what she was talking about. I knew it was real, and I knew I wanted it, but I knew I wasn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be the two kinds of things. And who would have told me that a good deal of my life would be trying to organize people to save their homes in Bed-Stuy, or to get proper water in South Jamaica. I didn't know where the South Jamaica was. I was from Jackson Heights. We thought of the center of the world as Manhattan. Um, so it was that, but some very interesting places. But there's also the depth. I said this, I'm not where those women were. I don't claim to be. But I have a better idea of a sense of it. And you can say, yeah, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
God's going to do what God is going to do, and a lot of it you're going to perceive as picking up a cross, and a lot of it is going to be picking up a cross, but it's worth it.
That's interesting. I think, as my perspective is often that I view the relationship with, like a priest as one directional, in that, I'm trying to, discern what you have to teach me, from God. And I think from that experience, it sounds like, from the unique perspective of the priest, it's often, both directional. And so it sounds like you, in some ways, derived lessons or what have you from the parishioners themselves.
Well, you get what you need, and you get it from whom you need it. Mm. And sometimes in my life, that has been my spiritual director. Sometimes it has been with priests with whom I have lived. But particularly at that critical stage of my life, it was, again, dying old Irish people.
Wow. So the other piece of the gospel that resonated with me that I was hoping you could shed some light on was the quote, "Whoever finds his life will lose it." Mm-hmm. I think upon reflecting, I have my interpretation of what he's saying there, but I was curious to hear yours.
Well, Father John has a wonderful quote from St. Bernard of Clairvaux, which I always misquote. So, Father, would you make a guest appearance?
Oh, jeez, put me on the spot. Mm-hmm. To paraphrase it, it's we need to let go of what we love so that we can receive what we desire.
Thank you.
That's not it. That's the paraphrase.
Okay. Yeah. See, my version of that is you have to kill what you love to get what you need. But his is so much nicer. That we live in such a way that we get used to to certain things that we like, certain things that are good, but they can impede us from attaining what we really need, which is a closer relationship with Jesus, which of course can only occur within community. And it rarely happens that we see this ourselves. Maybe once in my life, I did. So God, in his great mercy, when things seem to be going really well, will smash it and require you to start all over again. As I mentioned, one of the great principles of organizing is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it's broke, don't fix it, smash it, and start again. And I cannot help but think that this whole COVID-19 thing has, for our parish, been one of those experiences. Really, it could not have been going any better than it was in March. That very week, when we had to close down, we were planning a group that would work with because it was obvious that the young professionals, we kind of didn't think it through, and that it became young professionals who don't have children. Mm-hmm. Can be married, but once you have the children, so we needed another group that would probably meet at a time when young professionals with children, just with little children, of which there are a whole lot. We have 2 this week, and I think 1 more coming. Wow. Yeah, I know. even that we started, not to be too materialistic, but the money was doing really well. I mean, we were 48% higher than in our collections and donations than we were the year before.
Wow.
48%. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's all gone.
Mm.
But maybe it was coming together too quickly, too easily.
Mm.
And maybe God was saying, stand back. Now, what do you really want to do? What do we really need? Obviously, we were able to keep connected with people because we have technically talented people who could put together a mass. We can do something every day, from the book club to
Rosary.
to my favorite Vespers.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're talking about Vespers, that is lay led. That does not require a priest. It's the official prayer of the church, but it can be done by a layperson just as well as by a priest. Not that layperson has a nice singing voice. It can be done better by a layperson than a priest. You don't want me to try to sing it. So, is this God's way of saying what you were doing was good? Maybe you and the parish have to realize that it might have been a little too clerical.
Mm.
And secondly, just before this, a few ominous comments were made by one of my mentors in organizing. She is an Orthodox Jew, and I take her out to a good kosher restaurant twice a year, and we review what we've been doing in the parish, and she usually tears me apart. And she thought the danger was it was becoming too much my parish and not our parish. That it was too much me. And she made the obvious suggestion: you got to have more individual meetings with people who are not you. People got to do it themselves, and a few other practical things. But maybe this now we realize, again, as the number of priests decline, if we see the importance of the sacraments, and if they want sacraments, it's going to take, that's probably what I'm going to be doing the vast amount of my time. So I think even as a community, we have to see that sometimes what we think is going really great and might be wonderful, but it's not the kind of wonderful that God wants from us. Mm-hmm. And maybe we're not going to see it ourselves, so God's going to smash it.
Yeah, I think, I think that kind of aligns with how I was interpreting it, which, you mentioned kind of having to, one, not be so tethered to, the material things in our lives and not let that, play too central of a role. And I think the other part of it that I got from it was also, letting go of control in a more general sense. So I think there's obviously a natural human inclination to want to plan things, and at various times in our lives we may feel that we are in more control than others, and it always seems that the times when we perhaps feel that we are the most in control, have the most plans, and anticipate seeing those to fruition is when life throws a curveball at us, whether that be COVID or something more personal. And so I think it relates then back to that original, part of the gospel that we talked to, which underscores the importance of resilience and not having resilience and strength or perseverance not tied so much in material things or in plans that often don't go as you intended, but something deeper, and a belief in God and virtues and things like that allow you to adjust and keep going even when things don't go according to plan. So that was how I at least read it. But yeah.
Well, that is I'm being told here that we have to wrap up. So, could you tell us one thing that you really like about the parish? That you said you interviewed a lot of parishes. you live kind of far away. What brought you? What made up your mind to come here?
Sure. So I will admit that it was fortuitous in that the original way I even came to find St. Charles is it became late on one Sunday after 5 p.m. And,
Yes.
You have St. Charles has the latest from, at least in the area of Brooklyn that I lived in, the latest mass, which was 7 p.m. And so it started just because that was really the only option. When I came, immediately I was struck by the beautiful music. And so, I think the music program to me was something that stuck out right off the bat. And then I think the other thing that, stood out as unique was, and I think it has something to do with the fact that it was the 7 p.m. mass, but when I looked around, there were a ton of people that I would, call my peers, just in a demographic sense. I saw a lot of people that seemed to be my age, essentially, which, especially in today's world, it is unfortunately unique, I would say, and a lot of church populations are aging. And so those were the initial things that I think made me want to investigate further. And I think in terms of now that I've become a parishioner, the things that have kept me here and that I've been especially appreciative of have been the communities within the community and the various ways that you have to interact and the options you have to interact with the rest of the parish. And so, like I mentioned, I am a member of the Young Professionals group, and that's something that I've really enjoyed being a part of. And so, having that, and again, like you mentioned, that's lay led, and so having that open dialogue and that forum to interact with my peers has been, really enriching to me. And so I think those type of options, like even something like this, where I have the opportunity to, speak with you one-on-one, and just all of the various means as a parishioner at my disposal and the different groups I can be involved with, and just the vibrancy there, I think is something that is unique and a tremendous asset. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was great. That was great to hear. And I hope you have a lovely 4th of July weekend.
You do the same. It was great talking to you.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.